Ambedkar's view on parliamentary democracy. Meaning of parliamentary democracy. India is the largest democracy in the world. Scholars have defined democracy in different ways. Dicey defines democracy as that form of government in which the governing body is a comparatively large fraction of the entire nation. Rice accepts the definition of Herodotus and says that democracy denotes that form of government in which the ruling power of the state is largely vested in the members of the community as a whole. 4 Bryce adds, this means in communities which act by voting, that rule belongs to the majority, as no other method has been found for determining peacefully and legally what is to be declared the will of the community which is not unanimous. Bagehot defines democracy as government by discussion, Lincoln as the government of the people, by the people and for the people. But Ambedkar was not satisfied with the definitions of democracy given by Walter, Bagehot or Abraham Lincoln. He viewed Grother's notions about freedom, self-government and democracy as fallacious and misleading. Ambedkar writes for, words such as society, nation and country are just amorphous if not ambiguous terms. There is no gainsaying that, nation, through one word means many classes. Philosophically, it may be possible to consider a nation as a unit, but sociologically, it cannot but be regarded as consisting of many classes, and the freedom of the nation, if it is to be reality, must vouchsafe the freedom of the different classes comprised in it, particularly of those who are treated as the servile classes. According to Ambedkar, democracy means a form and method of government whereby revolutionary changes in the economic and social life of the people are brought about without bloodshed. If democracy can enable those who are running it to bring about fundamental changes in the social and economic life of the people, and the people accept those changes without resorting to bloodshed, then, I say, that there is democracy. That is the real test. It is perhaps the severest test. 80 desired to remove the contradiction created by economic and social inequalities. He wanted to establish the principle of one man, one vote and one value, not only in political life of India but also in social and economic life. In other words, he wanted political democracy to be accompanied by social democracy. He was conscious of the social and economic inequalities which corrode the national consciousness of the Indian people. He said, we must make our political democracy a social democracy as well. Political democracy cannot last unless there lies at the base of it social democracy. Democracy means that political power is ultimately in the hands of the whole adult population, and that no smaller group has the right to rule. Democracy only takes on a more useful meaning when qualified by one or the other word with which it is associated, for example, liberal democracy, representative democracy, participatory democracy or direct democracy. Although all free societies are democratic, democracies can fail to protect individual freedom. Countries are considered democratic to the extent that they have fair and frequent elections in which nearly all adults have the right to vote, citizens have the right to form and join organizations and to express themselves. Democracy must ascertain the constitutional structure that best suits the needs of a particular country. Alternative forms of constitutional democracy include parliamentary versus presidential forms of government, plurality versus proportional representation system, and federal versus unitary systems. Ambedkar's view on parliamentary democracy. According to Ambedkar, parliamentary democracy is unknown to us at present. But India, at one time, had parliamentary institutions. India was far more advanced in ancient times. If you go throughout the suktas of Mahapranibhana, you will find ample evidence in support of my point. In these suktas it is stated that while Bhagwan Buddha was dying at Kusinagara, a message to the effect was sent to the Mallas who were sitting in session at that time. They decided that they should not close the session but would carry on with their work and would go to Kusinagara after finishing of the business of parliament. Ambedkar was a fervent believer in democracy. He took a rationalistic and comprehensive view of democracy. He was, by philosophical persuasion, a liberal democrat. While pursuing the cause of justice for the untouchables, he was in fact enunciating the democratic principle as the bedrock of justice. His vision of a democratic society was one in which there will be neither an oppressor class nor a suppressed class, equality before law and in administration and functioning of moral order in society. He wrote elsewhere that a society based on liberty, equality and fraternity should be the only alternative to a caste society. It should be full of channels for conveying a change, taking place in one part to other parts. It should be mobile. There must be social endosmosis. This is fraternity, which is only another name for democracy. He writes, democracy is not merely a form of government. It is primarily a mode of associated living, of conjoint communicated experience. It is essentially an attitude of respect and reverence towards fellowmen. He was aware of the fact that equality is a fiction and is glaringly fallacious, but believed that we cannot escape it. We can get the most out of people by making everyone equal as far as possible at the very start of the race. It is quite clear from this that he was taking a purely secular approach to the problem of democracy, and he believed in democracy that was complete and real. He firmly believed that political democracy could not succeed without social and economic democracy. According to him, social and economic democracy is the tissue and the fiber of political democracy. He did not make a secret of his utter dissatisfaction and dismay at the inadequacy of the democratic edifice created in the Constitution of India, of which he himself was the chief architect. In his address to the Constituent Assembly, he said on the 26th of January 1950, "We are going to enter into a life of contradictions. In politics we will have equality, and in social and economic life we will have inequality. In politics we will be recognizing the principle of one man one vote, and one vote one value. In our social and economic life, we shall, by reason of our social and economic structure, continue to deny the principle of one man one value. How long shall we continue to deny equality in our social and economic life? If we continue to deny it for long, we will do so only by putting our political democracy in peril. We must remove this contradiction at the earliest possible moment, or else those who suffer from inequality will blow up the structure of political democracy which this assembly has so laboriously built up." So, he attached high importance to establishing the principle of one man one value, along with the principle of one man one vote and one vote one value, that alone can make democracy complete and real. This is the soul of democracy. In other words, political power, economic strength and social position should be shared equally by all sections of society in a democracy. He pleaded for a share for the Dalits in the political power of the country so that they could influence decision-making and participate in the policy-making process in their favor. His idea of democracy is thus tinged with social realism, human experience and reason, pragmatic and humanistic outlook on life. He accepted the theory of state socialism instead of communism or capitalism for achieving economic equality and prosperity. To Ambedkar, three main things were inherent in parliamentary system of government. These were: parliamentary government means negation of hereditary rule. No person can claim to be a hereditary ruler. Whoever wants to rule must be elected by the people from time to time. He must obtain the approval of the people. Hereditary rule has no sanction in parliamentary system of government. To any law, any measure, applicable to the public life of the people must be based on the advice of the people chosen by the people. No single individual can presume the authority that he knows everything, that he can make the laws and carry the government. The laws are to be made by the representatives of the people in Parliament. They are the people who can advise the men in whose name the law is proclaimed. That is the difference between the monarchical system of government and the democratic system of government. In monarchy, the affairs of the people are carried on in the name of the monarch and under the authority of a monarch. In democracy, the affairs of the public are carried on in the name of the head of the state, but the laws and the executive measures are the authority on which the government is carried on. The head of the state is the titular head, he is merely a symbol. He is a concentrated murti. He can be worshipped, but he is not allowed to carry out the government of the country. The government of the country is carried out, though in his name, by the elected representatives of the people. Free parliamentary system of the government means that at a stated period those who want to advise the head of the state must have the confidence of the people in themselves renewed. According to him, this is also not enough. Parliamentary system of government is much more than government by discussion. There are two pillars on which the parliamentary system of government rests. These are the fulcrums on which the mechanism works. Those two pillars are 1. An opposition, and 2. Free and fair elections. About his preference of parliamentary system of government, Ambedkar wrote during the discussion in the Constituent Assembly, "There was a variety of opinion as regards the nature of the constitution that we should have. Some preferred British system, some the American system. There were others who did not want either of these two types of government. But after a long discussion a large majority of members came to a conclusion that the system of the parliamentary government as it is in Britain is best suited to our country. There are some sections of people who do not like the parliamentary government. Communists want the Russian type of government. The socialists are also against the present constitution of India. They are agitating against it. They have declared that if they come to power they will modify it. Personally speaking, I am very attached to the parliamentary system of government. 19 According to Ambedkar, there are some limitations leading to failure of parliamentary democracy in a country. In a parliamentary democracy, the executive may be held up by the legislature, which may refuse to pass the laws which the executive wants, and if it is not held up by the legislature it may be held by the judiciary, which may declare the laws as illegal. Parliamentary democracy gives no free hand to dictatorship, and that is why it became a discredited institution in countries like Italy, Spain and Germany, which readily welcomed dictatorships. 20 Ambedkar analyzed the reasons for the failure of some parliamentary democracies. He noted that even in countries pledged to democracy there may be a great deal of discontent and dissatisfaction against parliamentary democracy. The discontent against parliamentary democracy is due to the realization that it has failed to assure to the masses the right to liberty, property or the pursuit of happiness. The cause of this failure, he said, may be found in either wrong ideology or wrong organization or both. One such erroneous ideology is the idea of freedom of contract and its ignorance of the economic inequalities of the parties in the contract. Another wrong ideology that has vitiated the institution of parliamentary democracy is the failure to realize and feel that political democracy cannot succeed where there is no social and economic democracy. About bad organization, he says the following: all political societies get divided into two classes, the rulers and the ruled. This is an evil. If the evil stopped here it would not matter much. But the unfortunate part of it is that the division becomes so stereotyped and stratified that rulers are always drawn from the ruling class and the class that is ruled never becomes the ruling class. This happens because generally people do not care to see that they govern themselves. They are content to establish a government and leave it to govern them. Ambedkar warned the harbingers of democracy that if parliamentarian democracy fails in this land, the result will be rebellion, anarchy and communism. He says, I want you to take note of these eventful certainties, and if you wish that parliamentary democracy prevails in this country, if you are satisfied that we will be assured of our liberty of thought, speech and action, if we should preserve our independence, if we cherish the inherent right of individual liberty, then it is your duty as student, as intelligent community of our country, to strive your utmost to cherish this parliamentary system of government in its true spirit and to work for it. Let us sum up.